Hello, I am Mike Narrow with UE Systems, the ultrasound company. Today we're going to start part 2 of UE Spectralyzer 4.0. This is a two-part series. In the first part we discussed many things of the features of UE Systems Spectralyzer 4.0. In this section we're going to discuss how to operate some of the nitty-gritty features of Spectralyzer 4.0. So the only thing I have to say before we get going is if you don't have Spectralyzer 4.0, please go to our website, download it. It's under Product Software. Go to uesystems.com first, then it's under Products, then Software, and you'll find 4.0, and you can download it. It's ready, available right now on the internet. If you can't get it to download for whatever reason, please contact us so we'll get you a copy at 1-800-223-1325, 1-800-223-1325. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with how to operate it, and we're going to run a sound file. You can't hear it, I don't believe, but you'll be able to see it. So right now I'm running Corona. Now that's a sound file I had loaded already. Do remember, one of two ways you've loaded a file in here is either you have it saved in Ultratrend DMS and you've gone to that reading that you've downloaded with all the text information, and then you have the sound recording, and you've hit the launch button next to that sound file, and it opens up Spectralyzer with that recording ready to play, or you've done like I've done and come to File, Open File, and there's a bank of sound files that you have saved in that folder. And that's what I've done right now. Number one, I ran it, I hit run, it ran, but all my options are not available to me. A lot of stuff is grayed out. So the first thing I need to do is hit stop. Once I hit stop, that enables me to operate all the features of Spectralyzer. So notice here, I'm in an FFT series, and this is the first screen we'll work with, and I am zoomed really far out. So we went over all the different ways to zoom, and I'm going to pick a very easy one, but I'm zoomed very far out, and I want to get a little closer to where the activity is happening, and that looks like it's up here in the first third or fourth of the screen. So I'm going to draw a box around that first section here, and zoom in on that. Now I can see it. Okay, notice I'm still in my magnifying glass, which tells me I'm still zooming in and out, and I don't want to do that. I want to go back to the crosshair. Okay, so what we'll simply do is come over here and say, well, I have a lot of harmonics here. What's going on? So the first thing I'd like to do is, well, I know this is an electrical sound. Let's try the harmonic cursor. I type in 60 in the harmonic cursor box, and I'll turn it on. There it is. It's 60 hertz harmonic, giving me a good idea that it is Corona. Again, we're not really getting into analyzing here what it all means as far as the analyzation of it. You get that in different classes and stuff, but more so just how to operate the features. All right, so that's 60 hertz. Again, you see the 60 hertz up here. Now say I didn't know that it was that, and let's say we had a fault known at 120. Let's see if it lines up on 120. I could simply hit 120 in there and turn on 120. Well, there it pops up. I do have a harmonic there, but there's one at every half, so it's probably 60 like I first thought. Let's say we have absolutely no idea what the fault is. We'll type 0 in here. Actually, you can just leave it blank and not do anything. But bring your crosshair up to the first section, the first peak that you see that you think might be repeating itself as a harmonic, and then hit, once that crosshair settled in there, you'll hit shift or hold down the shift key and then left click. And I'm at 61 hertz. I'm a little off, so I need to move over just a little bit, I think, because I'm not really lined up. And as you see down the screen, if you're not lined up a little bit on the first one, you're going to be way off on the last ones, as you notice. So let's get that lined up again. To turn it off, you would hit Control left click. So hold down the Control key, left click, and it'll turn the harmonic cursor off. And I'll line up just a little bit to the left and see what happens. There I am, dead on 60 hertz. Still not quite where I wanted to be, but you get the idea of how to use that. All right. So that is the harmonic cursor. You can either type in the box, shift left click, or control left click to turn it off, or simply click in the box on off. Okay. Now, the other cursor controls we talked a little bit about, so let's play with those a little bit more. Notice down here in this cursor control box, you have cursor 1. So I'm going to turn on cursor 1. cursor 1 is not showing fully on the screen. I only have this x-axis value here. I want to see the whole thing. These little arrows and this star are the control for the cursor control of cursor 1 and cursor 2. So I will simply hit the star button and it brings it to center. Now I can again type in where I want the cursor if I want to, or I'll just nudge it over with the nudge tools with the arrows here. We call them nudge tools, and I can nudge it to where I want it. Or better yet, I can simply grab it and bring it to the peak of where I want it and line that right up in there. Alright, 61 point, we'll move it over just a little bit more. Alright, that looks dead on, 60.54 hertz. Alright, now that's good if I just want to measure one peak. What if I want to measure the distance between that peak and the next and see what the frequency difference is? I would turn cursor 2 on, and notice it highlights the one I'm working on. So both are on, but by highlighting the name, that's the one I'm controlling. I can't really see where cursor 2 is. It looks like it's overlaying right on top of it, so I'm going to hit bring to center. I'm controlling cursor 2 here as it's highlighted. Bring to center, there we go. Now I'll go grab it. I want to take that to that next peak and see where that is. Alright, that is at 120.3. So we subtract 120.3 minus 60.4, or 120 minus 60, and get about 60 hertz. And then you could simply move the cursors back and forward and do the same thing over and over and just subtract out the lower number from the larger number and get the difference in the peaks. Alright, so there's your cursor controls. Very nice features there, very easily done. Now, I'm going to turn one cursor off because I want to show you something. This is really neat here. So here we're at cursor number 1, and I'm going to right click, and now I've got some new things here to work with. Notice I have copy data, description to, visible items, that kind of thing. It's showing me what's on, what's off. I can export this whole graph into a simple bitmap, PostScript metafile, export to the clipboard and paste it somewhere else, or save it to a file by itself. So you can export this. Be careful with your colors of the screen because that will change what it looks like. But more importantly, because you can print the screen out by simply, if you remember, going to File, Report, and it'll print it out or save it as an HTML. But if you don't want it as an HTML, here's another way to do it. Export it out. Play with it a little bit to get your colors right on your bitmap, and save it to the clipboard and post it into a Microsoft Word document or something. But you can export this out and then edit it elsewhere, or edit it in Spectralyzer, change the color so you get the correct background colors you want and everything, and you'll have a nice file there to export. But what I want to show you is, very simply, come up there, right click, and you should see create annotation. If I create the annotation, I'm going to put look here. I could do lock style is free, snap to all plots, snap to one plot. I'm going to leave it free so I can move it around. I don't want to hide the arrow, and I don't want to lock the name. I'm just going to leave it up there, and now I can drag that thing anywhere I want so it sticks out in there. And so I can annotate that to electrical discharge, whatever I want to put there, whatever I want to type, and I can do as many of those as I want, and keep going with it and create all kinds of annotations before I export this or send this to somebody or whatever. And see, number 2, see? All right, now, and that's really good. And you can go back and change the names of those if you need to by simply clear graph and delete all annotations. So we're going to delete that. Now, one more feature that popped up there while we're in there, all I'm doing is right-clicking in the graph. If you want that annotation to be in a certain spot, line your crosshair up before you right-click. So if I want it to sit right here, I'm going to line up those crosshairs, then right-click, then go to create annotation, and that's going to put that line right on it. Another feature here is clear graph. It's gone. And that way you have a fresh screen to work with. Turn everything off and you have a blank screen. So remember, clear graph will do that. Create annotation, delete all annotations, and export simplified image. Those are the good ones to work with here. The others you can play with if you want, but those are the ones we really work with. Alright, so let's stop, rewind, and we got it back once I cleared the graph. How about that? So hit stop, rewind, and there it is again. Another thing we can do, let's say let's go to time series analysis. And notice it's showing me the whole picture the whole time from 0 to 6.7 seconds. But when I run it, we'll let 6.7 seconds happen here. It's only showing me that clip of that short time, but I want to see the whole thing. So if I just hit stop 2 times, it will zoom out and show me the entire clip of what's going on. Okay, and that's much better sometimes because you want to get that overall picture. Okay, same with the FFT. It'll pop it all back up in there. All right, now what we need to work with here, we've gone over the harmonic cursors, the cursors, and don't forget about the spot cursor. That's a nice one. If you'll simply line up your crosshair and hit alternate left click, that's going to give you your spot cursor, and you can really start to line things up. 60, 120 hertz. I'll do one more. You can do up to 3 at a time. 179, about 180. I didn't line it up good. And you can line those up. To get rid of those, simply left click on each one of those. All right, left click. So remember, alternate left click. All these descriptions are under help, so you can find out, or if you don't remember what I'm telling you right now, you can go back and look into the help section, and it'll tell you how to do the harmonic cursor, the spot cursor, that kind of stuff. Okay. What I want to work with right now are some overlays, though. And compare this, and save some overlays and load some overlays so you can see how to do that. Number one, I'm zoomed in really too far for what I want to do. So what I'm going to do is zoom out. I'm going to come to the magnifying glass and I'm going to zoom out. All right, and if I just hit simply left click, once I've chosen that, it's going to bring it down. Okay, all right. And it's not letting me go any further because of the scale on the dB. So what I want to do is simply X and Y. Now I'm zoomed all the way out, okay? So, you know, the zoom function will only let you go so far, but if you want to get all the way out, click the X and the Y down here, and you'll be all the way out. So I want to overlay some of these, but I really want to adjust this to mid-screen a little bit. So I'm going to type in, instead of negative 74 on the bottom, if you remember another way to zoom, negative 100. All right, now I've got it kind of in the middle of the screen. I'm zoomed out as far as I can, and I want to compare this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. I'm going to set this as an overlay. So I'm going to hit set. First I'm going to turn the overlays on, and then I'm going to hit set. And now this is set as overlay number 1. It will turn red as soon as I load the next overlay. Okay? But what I want to do is save it also. So let's go to File. I want to be able to pull this up anytime, not just right now in this brief moment. I want to be able to pull this up anytime. So I'm going to hit Save overlay number 1. All right, now this has a few overlays that we give you in Spectralyzer when you first open it, but we mean for you to use it and fill this folder up full of good stuff. All right, so I'm going to hit, I'm going to call this Mike's Corona. That way we know when we look this back up where it is, okay? So I'm going to hit Save As. All right, now I'm going to play. I'm going to hit Rewind. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to choose. I know it's tracking because I have it listed in here as tracking, but what I want to do is overlay tracking on it. Now you see, once I loaded that new file, that turned my Corona into red. It's now an overlay. You can't hear it, but you're able to see it. So what I want to do now is run that file I just loaded, which is tracking. We'll let the 6.5 seconds run out here. All right, now I can start to compare. You see, it's not looking the same. It's not very even across in amplitude. It starts to waver in its amplitude. And it looks like we have a few peaks, but not nearly as many. So let's zoom in right there a little bit. Let me see here. Let's draw a box around that area. Let's do that. Okay. Now, notice we have a few peaks, and they look like they line up exactly right. We could turn the cursors on and measure that, but really you can see one peak here, a peak here, and a peak here, and then it just starts to dissipate, and they don't line up anymore. So I have an idea it could be tracking. So what I could do, let's zoom all the way out again. All right, and let's set this one as an overlay. Let's turn it on, set it, all right, and let's save it. Let's save this one as an overlay. What happened? It's all grayed out. So what I need to do is hit stop. Remember, stop activates all my functions. All right. File, Save Overlay, and we're going to save this one as number 2 because we already have one saved as number 1. Save it as number 2, and we're going to save this one as, let's say it's mics or M tracking number 1 for tracking, because I have a different one I want to play for you. So I'm going to hit Save As. Alright, so there we go. Now watch, when I hit stop and I go to File, Open Wave File, I'm going to choose a different tracking. I want to say this one is going to be a little bit more substantial. Notice when I loaded the file, it turned tracking green. Now you can change all these colors. I like that green. It shows up nice. The red I'm having a hard time seeing. So we could easily change that color from red. Let's go into parameters. Look, overlay number 1 is red. I'm having a hard time seeing that red. I want something brighter. I like that fluorescent. So let's go, let's see, what other colors do we have in there? We've already got that yellow, so let's use, let me try that one. There we go. That ought to show up pretty good right there. All those colors should show up as overlays very nice against that dark background. So let's go back to FFT. There we go. Now we can really see those overlays. Let's run that second tracking file that I picked just a moment ago. Alright, now, as we see this one, you may have a hard time seeing it, and I'm going to zoom in on that and maybe even turn one off. But you see how I'm loading up on the overlays here. I'm going to zoom in down here on this left corner where everything's occurring. Notice the amplitude again is all messed up. We've got a lot going on here. It's a little messy, but we can follow it. Let's turn that number 2 off. So I'll come down here to the FFT overlay controls. I'm going to click on the check mark, and that turns number 2 off. Alright, number 1 is the white. If you notice, there are no harmonics left. Nothing's happening at 60 Hertz whatsoever as opposed to the Corona. So I've got a good idea now that this is probably something other than Corona. I'd have to go to the time series analysis and analyze it further to make that determination. But you can see, as I turn these overlays on and I load overlays, I can really start to compare on graphs. Be careful with your colors. Maybe I chose a little too bright of a blue. Maybe we should go back in there and change it to something a little dimmer. Because that's kind of hard to see. So let's go that color right there. Let's see what happens there. And now I can, that helps a little bit, but you get the idea, right? So overlay number 1, the reddish orange color is Corona. The green is tracking, still with some harmonics left at the very beginning at the 60 Hertz, and then tracking in this stage here, and it looks nothing like the Corona. So, is it tracking? Is it arcing? What's it doing? This is how we analyze it. We compare. Okay? Now, anything else I'd like to show you here? I believe that's going to get it. Do remember you can change the format, the precision, and the mapping mode. I use these pretty much just the way they are in linear, and with the precision at 1 and the format at SI. You can change it to decimal, scientific, or whatever you want. But I leave it at the default. Simply because that's the way I learned. You may know much better than I do to change that to something else. You remember you can lock the grids. This resets the values all the way out to where they are. So it goes as far as it will go. So that's really way far out. But we could hit 4K there and bring it in just a little bit, and then you get a better idea of the picture there. Okay, so zooming, panning, the crosshair, the features here of the lockbox, the zoom all the way out features, and your mapping modes or your configurations, a little bit of that. Now let's say I really like the configuration I had here. In fact, let's go in here and change a little bit more. Let's change this to a lighter background because I'm going to send this thing off. So let's choose this as a background color. Let's make these a little lighter than they are. They're dark, but maybe they're too dark. Alright, this one's definitely too dark, so we'll choose it just a little. I want something to show up, but not too much, okay? And then the data, we'll choose dark blue, or just true blue. Let's go back and look at that. Now I can see that. That would be a much better version to print out than, say, the dark blue background. I could even go lighter, again, to print that out. So now I hit stop, and I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to save that configuration. I like the configuration. So we're going to name this mic number 2 configuration, since I already have one in there. Alright, and then hit OK. So at any time I can go back and load these configurations. So right now if I load a configuration, let's do electrical or your default electrical and see what happens. Alright, so that's the default electrical. But if I go back and I load what we just did, mic 2, it's going to give it back to me just the way I left it. Okay, so very important to load your configurations. It really makes things a lot faster if you'll get it set up the way you like it, and that's all your parameters. That's your RMS averaging, your exponential linear weighting, what type of FFT window, all that stuff. It's going to save that as long as you save that configuration. Okay, so we've played around a little bit with the FFT. We've looked at that. Remember, when you turn the cursors on, it is giving you your X and Y axis. It's gone. It's not in the screen, so I'm going to hit the star. There it is. And if you look at that over here on cursor 1, you're going to see 2,000 kilohertz, or 2 kilohertz, 2,000 hertz is the X value, and negative 39.70 decibels is where it's sitting right now. Okay, so that's dead center of that screen, and that's the information it's giving you. Remember, you can change this from CPS to CPM or hertz to CPM, cycles per minute, on your scale. So you guys that like to use CPM, you now have that availability. And your harmonic cursor is giving you the exact point and frequency. Okay, and frequency. So now let's look at time series analysis. Let's go back. Let's load a different configuration instead of the one I have up here. Let's load. Let's just load electrical or default. Let's go back to default configuration. See what happens. Well, that's not loading what I wanted. Let's go back and load configuration and go back to electrical. Let's try this one. There we go. That's the one we're talking about right there. Alright, so that's basically your default configuration. The blue with the light blue backgrounds or light greens, whatever color you perceive that as. Alright, let's run a wave file. Let's go choose, well, let's just go choose Corona again. Let's just keep working with this one. And hit run. Okay, so now I've run that wave file. Remember, you may have launched this. You may have launched this from DMS software, and so be aware. You pull it from either place, or you may be watching it real. You may be taking that laptop out there and hook this thing up to the Ultra Probe, and you're watching it in real time. However, what we're looking at here is a time series analysis. We're looking at time versus amplitude or decibel, and we're looking at the events occurring. We don't have too many, we don't have any overlays, remember that, and the one thing we do have is cursor 1 and cursor 2. Now the nice thing about cursor 1 is it's going to calculate my frequency for the cursor of whatever I'm highlighted on. Okay, so let's turn cursor 1 on. It's nowhere on the screen really, so let's hit the star button, bring it to center, and then I can grab that, and notice that's going to calculate my frequency for me right here, which is 0.00198027 hertz. So a very low frequency on that, right? Let's go over here and see where we're sitting. All right. I may be calculating the wrong one. There we go. It's changing the frequency, the hertz right there. You see that on the bottom scale? It's changing it for me. All right. I am zoomed really far in on this. But see, I'm at the very beginning of where that is. So if we were to bring that down here, you'd see a higher value. But that's just telling me in hertz where that's happening. Okay, it's cycles per second. And then the cursor again is giving me time now instead of frequency as the X value, and decibel as the Y-axis for the cursor. Not a lot to work with here as far as showing you anything new. It's time series analysis. You can zoom in. You have the crosshairs. Zoom in just the way I showed you before. Pan across the screen if need be. Of course, I'm zoomed all the way out at this point. And then, again, the scales. I've apparently locked the X-axis, and that's what's going on with that. So that's why that was a little messed up. As far as showing the hertz. So let's stop, rewind, run this thing again, see what happens. Alright, let's turn that off. Let's turn the cursor 1 on. We'll bring it around, and now it's adjusting a little better. Okay, there we go. Alright, so you see how it's telling me exactly, even though it's showing time on the x-axis, it will calculate the frequency for me. Alright, the dual, this is very simple. You know, again, it's just the two cursor controls. We're looking at time. We can pan across in time and see what happens. You know, and to the very end of the format, hit stop, and it's going to give me my whole thing all the way out. The number of samples, remember, the more you run that up for the FFT, the higher the, in fact, we didn't do that in the earlier version. Let's do that right now. So let's hit rewind. Let's hit the number of samples up to 1634 and see what happens as it tries to build all that information. Now, earlier I spoke of, in the first section, how it builds the frequency content up in between the actual harmonics. We still have our nice harmonics sticking out nicely, but look in the middle. What's going on in there? I'd have to zoom really far in to get a good explanation of what's going on in there. So I like to just keep it right at 4096. Sometimes, now that opened it up pretty nicely, but if you really want to see what that looked like correctly, once you change the number of samples, come over here and hit run, okay? And that's going to reset all the values for you. Alright, so remember, you can create the annotations and tell you exactly what's going on. Same here. Create the annotation and all that stuff. Now look, I'm still in the pan hand, and I really want to get out of that because I may pan across. But time series is pretty simple. Clip it in time, see what's going on. It won't let me do it because I haven't hit stop. You've got to remember to hit stop. You know, and that's going to show you in time what's going on, okay? And notice down here the time changes a little bit as you do that. So now what I want to do is show you that dual waterfall. Now when you pull up dual, it's not going to show you what you've been playing. You've got to rewind it and play it again when you go to the dual section. Okay, so it's going to be blank. So we'll hit it, we'll run, because we really want to watch that in real time. So now we can see what's going on. Now I had zoomed in a little bit in the other FFT and time series analysis, and that affects what it's going to show here on the screen here. But you can zoom in and out by changing the numbers, by zooming in with the magnifying glasses, whatever, if it's too far out, or if you just want to get closer on one section. But this is just giving you both screens at the very same time. So really good for just a quick analysis. Hey, you know, let's look at that. And then notice you still can change the axis scale on the FFT. Remember, the FFT is up top, time series is on the bottom. All right. Under the waterfall analysis, a few things to show here. This is a little new to us. You may be used to it, but let's play it first off, and we'll talk about it. Now, again, this is giving us a 3D view, but to change any of your axes or anything, you can't click on it like you can the other graphs. So what you need to do is frequency access ranges, minimum, being the left-hand side here, is 10. That means 10 hertz, and maximum would be 2000 hertz. If I wanted to spread that out or zoom in, I would simply change the number in here. If I wanted to zoom in, I'd put a lower value. So I'm going to put 10 to 1000 hertz. Now it's spreading that graph out, and I can really see that nicely. All right. Same with the peaks. My dB access range is -70, which I don't want to go too far beyond that, because you see that peak there is close to that -70 bar, but the max is -30. All right, and the max we're seeing here is just a little above, or above -50, around -49. So we could put something in here like let's say -41, and notice that grows my peaks a little bit. I've zoomed in on the y-axis. Values are the same. The values are the same. It's just showing me I'm zooming in a little better so I can see where they are. Now you can go off screen if you go too far. Same here with the sample history length. The more number of samples, the shorter this thing gets. Okay? The less number of samples, the longer it gets. So you can really play with that and clip that any way you want. But just notice that's just changing. You're zooming in, you're zooming out, your sample history length, that kind of stuff. So you can get some good information out of it, basically, is what's happening here. So that's the control for that. Under parameters, let's talk about this just a little bit. RMS averaging. Are you using RMS averaging? Most people do, but you may want to use a peak holder vector, or maybe you don't want to average it at all. Again, the default value is RMS, and that's where I leave it. But this is where you would choose those things. Once you choose it, go back, rewind it, and play it again, so that it's showing you the correct way of doing it. All right, exponential or linear weighting. Exponential is pretty much what it always adheres to, or defaults to. You can change it to linear. And the number of averages. Again, the number of averages is kind of like the number of samples. The more you average it, the more frequency content you're going to have in there that you're going to have to mull through to get to the actual meat of that sound wave. Now the FFT window here is none. I believe I chose this was for electrical, but I would rather have it as Hanning, the most common type of window. These are slight changes in the things, in the way it works. If you're not familiar with these terms and don't truly understand FFT, leave it at Hanning. That is the most common window I know of for FFT, and that's what I've been teaching you on for the most part here. And then the wave file parameters. Nothing here too much complicated. You know, what's the path? Where's this thing stored at in your computer? Do you want it to play to speakers? Notice I haven't hit stop. If I hit stop, it allows me to change these things. Do I want to change where it is, what it is, to play back? Play to speakers? Yes, of course. Enable alarm. Pretty much keep that off. You can use it, but there's a little alarm on the bottom here. You see this little green thing. It'll go red when the alarm goes off. It goes above a certain decibel level, basically. Match playback time to recording time. That, I can't imagine why you'd want that off. Maybe you do, but I like it to be off at the same time. And devices, 0. You can change that, but leave it at 0. Channel was mono. The sample rate was 8,000, and the resolution was 8 bits on this thing when this one was recorded. Pretty old recording. It came from an external device. It was not the UltraProbe 10,000, which I believe records at 16,000. Yeah, 16,000 hertz and 32-bit. Could be 16-bit. I can't remember. These up here would be real-time and record mode parameters for the channel sample rate and resolution being set by your computer at this point, because you have UltraProbe plugged into the computer and you're recording that way. And so you can decide where it records and what resolution you want it at, okay? And then the chart background. Okay, we've changed this, we've played with this. This is really easy. Reset the default, you know, just very easy to get it back to what it was. So, you know, there's not much more here on the screens I really want to show you. We'll go through it, real quick overview here of what we've covered. The FFT. Remember the cursors. These are cursor 1 and cursor 2, free moving. You can grab them with your crosshairs by left click holding and moving them around. You can annotate, create an annotation, description of what is going on. You can clear the graph. You can export that if you're familiar with bitmaps. If you have MS Paint, Microsoft Paint on your computer, it'll export it straight to it and you can play with it there. Visible items, easy enough. Description and tip. That's basically like a little information box of what this section is that you've clicked on. It's kind of like instructions for that little section of the screen. And then the controls, the nudge tools, and remember the star will bring your cursor and cursor 1 and cursor 2 right to the center so you can see it. Sometimes you've zoomed in too far and when it turns the cursor on, it's off screen. So you want to hit that star, bring it right to center. Harmonic marker, you know, love this. We've changed the way this works. It makes it so much easier. You still have the control of shift, left click anywhere you want the harmonic, or you can actually set it to a certain point and then turn it on, and that just works great. You know, the x-axis scale, a lot of guys were asking for this, but it goes to the CPM, and if you change that scale on the bottom, notice I just did it, it changed the scale. Now look at this graph. I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but it messes the graph up until you actually rewind and get it ready again, and now you're set up for the CPM. Notice it says frequency CPM. If I go back to hertz, that's going to put it in hertz for me, okay? And then if I hit rewind from that point, it'll get my scale back to the hertz. FFT controls. Cannot stress the importance of saving some overlays under this and having those ready and available. When you find a good example of something, corona, a good bearing, whatever it may be, save that. Make that an overlay so you can always come back and compare to it easily. You know, if you save them in DMS, they're always there, but you may have to go hunt and find them, you know, 2-3 years down the road. But if you put them in that file under load overlays, then it's always there and it's always available. Save your configurations. You know, get this thing set up the way you like it. Save that configuration and use it. Okay. what I really want to show you now, and this will pretty much end our tutorial here, pretty simple controls overall, is file and save as. So what we need to do first is run a sound file. So what do we have? Again, we have Corona. Now, this may be the wrong type of file to save. Let's see what it's going to save it as. I hit stop. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to hit Save As. And it's a sound file. It's a .wav. But I want to make this a file that anybody can play, whether with Windows or with Spectralyzer or whatever it is. And so we need to change it. Windows Media is constantly changing. All these sound playing devices for your computer softwares are constantly changing. So what we're going to do is, number one, we're going to name it something different than what it is. So we're going to say Corona Converted. That way I know what it is. And I could probably say that in a different spot. And I'll hit Desktop. Or I'll go under My Music maybe. Let's put it under My Music. Where would that be? We'll just use Desktop. I didn't change it because I didn't click on it. Desktop. And then I'm going to change. The most important thing here, I'm just telling you where I'm going to save it. It doesn't really matter where you save it as long as you can go get it. In fact, I'll put it in this file here, WAV files, under WAV. But notice the name's Corona Converted. But what I want to do is make sure that I can play this with Windows Media or whatever. And right now, the way this thing saves, or the way the 10,000 saves the recordings, you can't play it with Windows Media unless you convert the type of file. So I'm going to change this to the only other option I have is All Files. All right. So instead of Sound File, we're going to go to All Files, and I'm going to put that in that spot. And then we're back to Desktop because it changed where it was. There we go. All right, in the WAV file folder, and I'm going to hit OK. All right, now it's saved. It's saved there. So let's shrink down here. Let's open this up and find Corona Converted, and let's see what in the world that's going to play. It should open up with whatever I want it to open up with. I could open it with iTunes, Windows Media Player. Let's do this because I want you to see what happens. All right, it's saying it may not work, it's not recognized. That's okay. All you got to do is hit, do you want the player to try to play this content? Yes, you do. And it's going to play it. It's playing it right now, loud and clear. So easy enough. Remember, the process for this is very simple. All we're going to do is go to File. Once we've played it, hit Stop, Save As, and save it with a different name than whatever you've named it. Change the sound file type to All Files and pick a place for it that you can easily access it, and then you can email that file to anybody. It doesn't matter what kind of sound player they have. But if you keep it as a WAV file, only certain sound players will play that WAV file. So very important to remember that before you try to email the actual sound off. Now, if we go here to File again, we've talked about Open WAV File, and that just opens up my bank of files. It's a folder under, it's actually under your C drive now, so it's a little bit separate of Spectralyzer, but it always goes there. That way, whenever you update, you never lose any of your sound files, or if you have to uninstall Spectralyzer and reinstall, you're not losing any of your sound files. It sits right under the C drive. Save As, the configurations, the overlays, reports. Let's talk about this a second. Remember, you can't export through the bitmap option. In that section, just right click on the screen, or you do it this way. Now this again is too dark. We don't want to print it, but if you're just going to email it, it's fine. But if you think anybody's going to print it, you want to change those colors to make it printer friendly. If I open this up, this is what it shows. None of these buttons are active, okay? Nothing happens. It's just a screen capture. All right, so it's just a straight screen capture. That initialize button makes it look like something's going to happen. It's not. There's the screen capture of the graph. There's the screen capture of all the information, the WAV file path, and then you can type in notes, okay? This kind of makes it look like you can click on this and get to the WAV file and it sends it. It does not. This is simply a screen capture. So if you want to email this sound file off, you need to email the actual sound file after you have converted it like I showed you, and then do this, reports, the screen capture, and then come back to File, Save As, HTML file, save it somewhere, easily accessed on your computer, and then grab that. So you would actually send two attachments, the WAV file itself and then the screen capture showing what it looked like when you analyzed it. So remember, if you just send this, they don't have any sound, it's just a picture. Okay, so we'll X out of that, and that's it. That's how to operate UE Spectralyzer 4.0. It's pretty simple software. You got to play with it, learn it, read those instructions. There's little hints and things there, and things to remind you what I told you about. But a pretty simple software overall, but gives us a whole lot of power. To analyze that sound. Just what we need for this. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. You can call us at 1-800-223-1325. Look us up on our website at www.uesystems.com and go to contact us there, and it's got all the information if you're calling from overseas, how to call us, or email us at info@uesystems.com, info@uesystems.com. Make that UE Systems, make it plural.com, and type in your question and we'll get back to you on that. Or again, call us at 1-800-223-1325. I urge you to check out the website. There's always hints, tips, and everything available there. I assume you've already been there if you're watching this little tutorial here on Spectralyzer, but feel free to go in there and check anything else out. And again, contact us with any questions you have. We have several training opportunities available to you. Whether it's just one-on-one where we're talking to you over the phone or where you're actually attending a class on something, but all that information is on the website. And again, feel free to call with one question. We want to answer it. We want to make sure that you're running with this smoothly and that you don't have any questions. So contact us. Again, I'm Mike Nair with UE Systems. Enjoyed you being here. Thank you for your time, and let us know how we can help you.